This is Your Space with your host, Hannah Arinito. We are here for another great episode. And with me today in studio, I do have a mix and match of people from all different walks of life. I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves before we get into our conversation for today. I'll start with the only gentleman on the panel. Hello and welcome to Your Space.
Thank you so much. A pleasure is mine. My name is Odong Okelo. I'm a community organizer, a counselor, and a theatre practitioner as well. And I'm proud to be here on this space today.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is the first time we're having a community organizer, right? Part of the conversation. Hello and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Hannah. My name is Monica Achario. I'm a lawyer by profession, and I'm very excited to be here.
Mm-hmm. Hello, Dr. Patricia, and welcome to the show once again.
Good evening, listeners and viewers out there. I am Patricia Achano Kiria. I'm also a lawyer by profession and the Deputy Inspector General of Government. I'm very happy to be part of this conversation today.
Thank you so much. So today's conversation is around how cultural and historical differences can be included in combating of corruption. Does it even really matter, for us to even consider our cultural heritages or our historical heritages when it comes to the fight against corruption? And I think I'll start with Odong. Do any of these things matter? Our history, our culture, where we come from, do any of these things matter to us?
Yeah. I mean, to know who you are, you need to know where you're from. You need to know your past. And I think a lot of what's happening in our society today is, I should say it's part of a bigger crisis. I should say is identity. We don't know our origins, we don't know our culture, we don't know our history, we don't know where we've come from, we don't know who we were in the past. So for us to try to combat some of the things that are happening today, we need to remember our past, remember where we came from, remember who we are, as a way of looking at who we are right now and where we want to.
Yeah, I like that. That actually gets me asking a question. Does everyone here know where they come from, who they are? Where do you come from?
Me, I come from.
Okay, oh yeah. Where do you come from?
I come from Oyam.
Oh yeah. Oh, we have Karamets here. Dr. Patricia, where do you come
I come from Kedia.
Bukeria, yes. All right, and also come from Chungamo. So, Monica, do you think that understanding our cultural heritages, our history, really does matter when it comes to the fight against corruption today?
Yes, I do. I'll just take us back to the preamble of the Constitution of Uganda. It says, "We, the people of Uganda, remembering our history." Basically, we are pointing back to something about the past that unites us and makes us want to operate the way the Constitution is going to dictate. So if we can unite our voices and speak to the establishment or drafting, crafting, and then establishing an entire constitution, that means that if we again remember our historical differences, similarities, and then unite as a front, we can definitely take on anything, corruption inclusive.
Yeah, I like that. I like how you've given us that background. Dr. Patricia, with your experience as the Deputy IGG, do you think that understanding our culture as Ugandans matters in the work that you do on a daily?
I think it does, because there's a way in which culture helps to influence our thinking, our values, our norms. For instance, we the Acholi call corruption Chamsana.
Chamsana?
Now, Chamsana, how did it come about? When you trace it traditionally, long ago, people would come all day from Macholi sub-region to come to Kampala to process their documents. And then when someone does for you work, then they will say, Mpako Chamsana.
I think in Uganda,
so that is the reason why today in Acholi corruption is called Chamsana. So when you look at it from that perspective, you get to see how culture is intertwined in the war against corruption. And then you think about the traditional approaches to justice. For us, we're used to sorting things pacho at a round table where people sit, the elders sit and determine not just an individual dictating on how things should happen. So I think it's important for us, one, to understand the context within which corruption happens, how it began long ago. How was it mitigated? How was it dealt with? So you find that cultural norms, each culture has its own set of values and norms. And when we understand this, it can help us understand why certain corrupt practices are tolerated or even overlooked. For example, what may be viewed as a bribe in one culture, in another culture may be seen as a customary gift.
Oh.
So when you look at culture and the issue of values, traditionally, the values were inculcated in children by the grandees, by the elders. We had what we call wang o, where people would sit at a fireplace and the grandparents would tell us the stories, and we would get to learn so many things and aspects about our totems, the norms, the values, and so on. And now when you look at the historical legacy, countries with history of colonization, people who have experienced conflicts, basically may have entrenched systems that foster corruption. Because, for instance, if you look at northern Uganda, historically, we were in conflict for some time. The war in northern Uganda took a very, very long time. And because the war took a very long time, there are some people who are beneficiaries to that war. How were they beneficiaries? There are people who are supplying food, supplying goods. The NGOs became more than almost the population in northern Uganda.
True.
So when we acknowledge this history, it is very crucial to develop an effective anti-corruption strategies. And from what Monica was saying, pulling from the preamble of the Constitution, when we recall those past injustices, the historical challenges we went through, you find that sometimes there are some historical differences which may even fuel corruption. Like, for instance, there are some people who are favored by some segments of society, may be favored by history. So those who are left behind may want to compensate by stealing. Some people will say, traditionally, we are not the ones in the thing, so we will be the ones stealing. So when you look deep at the historical injustices, which may favor some corruption aspects or incidences, you find that citizens may be forced to resort to some corruption tendencies as the only way to access essential services. Now, what does that tell me? Where the state can provide essential services for its citizens, where there is decency, decent standard of living, decent formal laws, institutions, then the people are less likely to be corrupt. But where there is a problem, the state is attempting to provide the little the state is providing, some people are waiting for it and stealing. And we, the Inspectorate of Government, are struggling to see that we recover what has been stolen. So you find that if there is decency and services, essential services are provided, you find that corruption will be really minimized. So nobody is inherently corrupt, Monica, because of their culture. But corruption can become socially legitimized in the context where it is only the only way to get around certain shortcomings. So that's how people take bribes, offer bribes, and find themselves caught in. But there is also the other luzalo, where people have been raised without values.
And I want us to just put a comma on that, because I think that's quite interesting. When I look back at my experience in university, we also equally had our own cultural kind of setup. We used to call them ebimeza, right? Where we used to come together and have the leaders have conversations around what is not going right, how can we be able to move forward. But I'll come back to you, Odong. How then can we be able to pick a leaf or learn from our history? Because sometimes people say, oh, that is the old ways, you know, we don't really need to look at that. We're now in the new era, we're in the .com era. What is your perspective on that?
You know, like the Deputy IGG has said, in actual it is cham sana. In Lamu it is cham chana.
Chamchana.
Chamchana.
Okay.
It's just the pronunciation that.
And that's the chemisana which
In
people will be
Uganda.
asking for in Buganda here, because I've done for you your work. Mpe chemisana.
I
So
don't know
that
what it's
became the
called in
name of
my language.
corruption.
What is it called in my
When you dig into the history and the historical differences of Uganda, you realize the events that have led to where Uganda is. For example, the war in northern Uganda. You have the insecurity in the northeastern part of Uganda amongst the Karamojong and the Teso people. You're talking about the insecurity as well in West Nile. So some of these issues that I believe, haven't gotten time as a nation to address have led to a lot of individualization of communities and societies and nations, to the point whereby everybody now it's a more of like, okay, if this society is in power, if this society probably has someone in a position of power, they feel they are entitled. They feel, okay, they can do and get away with anything. Recently, when the president donated a vehicle to one of the clergymen in the West, a lot of people were up in arms. Why would you donate a vehicle in whatever is happening? The high cost of living in the country, the economic situation is hard, and you're donating a vehicle. To him, he's going to come out and defend and say it's a tradition, it's a norm in their culture to gift someone. You get, so he's gifting a car. But to us, the people of today are going to look, okay, how do you do that in such a time? So you get how
there's a clash.
You get how the clash is coming in, right? So if we don't get to, like I said at the beginning, if we don't get to know where we've come from, who we are, there are things we are going to really either put out of context or see them different. And to me, I believe one of the fundamental ways I think we all have different norms from our own ethnicities and tribes.
As individuals now.
As individuals. I hate using the word tribe. I love to call people ethnicities and societies and communities. Each one of them have their own norms, their own values, and their own customs. And I believe none of those societies or people advocate for corruption.
Yeah, none.
You get none. I believe none of them advocates for, oh, steal and do this. You get, it's more of like, it's a collective thing, right? We are together. We are one. If I see that my neighbor, if I see that someone is in need and I'm able to offer, let me stand in, right? But just a brief, one of the groups I'm in, it's a book club in Entebbe. We are discussing a book, The Bell is Ringing, by
The bell is ringing.
Martin Alikay this Saturday. And one of the things we talk about, the pre-colonial societies. If probably a brief historical background, when Kabaka Mwanga and Kabalega were being pursued by the colonialists, they took refuge in Lao, Kangai, in Dokolo, and the Luos fought and defended them for 2 days, against the British. They defended them, they fought for them, and if it wasn't for like collective efforts from the Luos, probably they would have been captured earlier. Why am I saying this? That if you look at our culture, our history culturally, we had this thing of standing up for one another. We had this thing of being empathetic and sympathetic towards one another. Currently, because of unaddressed historical and political differences, it has bred a habit of individualization. Let me just finish this. Last year, when we had the school that was attacked by the ADF in the West, a lot of people felt, oh, it's a Western thing. It's none of our business. You get, because we feel like, okay, I don't care. But where has this spirit come in?
I know.
You get, where has this thing coming from? It's because we have failed to harmonize and deal with our past differences. And I believe if we probably get to a table and deal with some of these issues, tackling vices like corruption would be a very easy thing to.
Let's just take a break. We'll be right back in just a few. Welcome back from that short break. You are still here on Your Space with your host, Hannah Arinito. We're still having a very interesting conversation about how our culture, our heritage can come together, especially when it comes to the fight against corruption. And I did hear all your responses, but I think sometimes maybe it's not realistic, you know, Dr. Patrick, maybe it's not realistic because I feel like the environment first, capitalism. But today there is so much capitalism. How can we be able to overcome that?
Thank you very much, Hannah. I think as citizens, we need to be purposeful and intentional. First of all, in appreciating the cultural dynamics and differences. Know that we have all come from somewhere. We need to know where exactly we have come from. Like Okello has just clarified, in order to project and see where we are going. But the whole thing needs a holistic approach and with unity of purpose, where if there is a problem in one region, you can say it is their problem. If there is a problem on anyone who is a citizen of this country, it is our problem, not just for that person. So I think we need to promote more of education and awareness into these issues. If we can understand the history and cultural context, and then from the history, like Monica pulled it from the preamble of the Constitution, then we project and see where we are going. But how are we getting there? How? You remember the 10-point program had fighting corruption as one of the issues to be tackled, and it is still persisting. I think as Ugandans, we need a holistic approach. We can tailor trainings and education and awareness program in the cultural context of whichever region you're going to. Like, for instance, if I'm going to Karamoja, I tailor my program to fit their cultural context in order to be able to pass the anti-corruption messages to them. Because educating citizens about their rights and the detrimental effects of corruption can maybe empower them to resist corruption practices when they know and they are able to demand for accountability from an informed perspective. I think it will make a difference. Then we need to encourage more of dialogue. If I can come to a show like this and talk about how we, the Acholis, looked at corruption as Echemsana, how it started. And people must know and say, hey, it started like a Chemisana or someone asking for mayor lunch. And by the way, you trace it back to the anti-corruption laws. We had the Prevention of Corruption Act in Uganda in the 1970s. And it looked at corruption from just bribery perspective. But today we have amended the laws, and the Anti-Corruption Act of 2010 looks at so many offenses with corruption. So when we tailor some of these programs, pull it from how it used to be in the past, bring it to the present, and we project and see how will it be in the future. I think it's important. Open discussions about corruption and its impact can help us dismantle even the stigma that surrounds the issue, and it paves way for collective action. Remember, we said we need unity of purpose. We need to look at it from a holistic perspective. Then we need to engage deeper with the stakeholders, the community involvement. Does the community know about the effects of corruption in every community in this country? We need to involve local communities in decision-making processes so that they make decisions from their own perspective, which helps them to ensure that there are anti-corruption initiatives in every aspect of the decisions they're taking. So it helps to ensure that corruption initiatives are culturally relevant to the people, and they're also supported by the state. So I think this grassroots approach can also foster trust and collective ownership, because if the community owns this program, they will embrace this program and take it as theirs. Like we have said in the Inspectorate of Government, the fight against corruption remains the people's war, because at the end of the day, it is the people who are victims of these acts of corruption. It is the people who, when they go to hospital and find drugs have been stolen, who suffer. It's the people who, when their children go to school and there are no teachers to teach them, who suffer. So I think we need to engage the people. Then we need also to collaborate with the local leaders. If we collaborate with the local leaders, then it's the local leaders who can take this drive down to the grassroots. We need to partner with respected community leaders and organizations to enhance this credibility and effectiveness. As this figures out often significant
on the matter
measures.
of
Yes.
community engagement, I just want to find out from your experience as a community organizer, mobilizer, are any of these feasible? Do you see any of these engagements that Dr. Patricia is sharing? Do you see any of them as feasible ways for communities to have that unity in the country? Best of your experience on the ground.
Thinking about it.
No. I'm not thinking about it. But I'm just trying to see how do I respond to you. You see, in community organization, there is something we call community-owned projects or initiatives, right?
Are those the same as CBOs?
No. CBOs and NGOs, those are
Charity.
charity kind of things.
Yeah.
Now, when I say community-owned projects or initiatives, I mean programs or initiatives that have been started by people within a community. You see, it's one thing as a social worker, as a community organizer, for me to come and I project my ideas onto you, thinking they will work. A lot of the leadership, a lot of the leaders, a lot of the NGOs we have come with the mindset that this is what is going to work. You get.
But do they even understand the problem? Because I've also come to realize we have solutions, but we don't really
We don't know what problem you're solving.
what problem.
That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Problem.
That's what I'm trying to tell you, that they come with the mindset that they think this is what will work. You see, we, as a country, as Uganda, as a people, we are different in regards to the norms and perceptions that we have based on where we come from, right? Now, there is this thing they say that the Langos are independent-minded people. At home they say it's hard to deal with the Lango community. You get, because we are so independent-minded people, right? We are not a people who are going to just come and say do this and what?
And we do it.
We are going to do it, right? It takes time, you get. But once we buy into a belief or a conviction,
That is true.
we are going all out for it, right?
That is
So
true.
if you go to my Megu,
Sorry.
Makiria, actually they're so communal,
Yeah.
right?
That
They're
is
so
so
together, right?
Yes.
They're so one. It's easy, right, to deal with such a community, right? When you go to the Atekere people, the Karamajongs and the Ateso, now these are wild. You get, these are wild people, right? You're not going to just come and impose a program onto them, right? So when I say that community-owned, can we get to a point whereby we engage these people on ground, right? Can we get to a point whereby instead of us coming to impose programs, initiatives, impose ways of addressing issues, can we sit down with them and ask them, how can we address this based on what you guys know or what you guys have, right? Because the way I deal with, if you look at the northern spectrum, the northern region, from West Nile up to Karamoja, that's the Walk region, West Nile, actually, now Karamoja. These are warlike people. These are warlike tribes. These are warlike communities, right? The way you deal with them is not the way you're going to deal with the Bantu-speaking communities, right? Because there's a difference in how
So
they deal, right?
I get you. So
my point comes in, like, can we engage these people
on their level.
on their level, right? Can we engage them based on
I
who
like
they
that
are,
idea.
right?
Yeah.
Can we engage them based on culturally, how are they? Because at the end of the day, we are all attached to our cultures.
True.
We are all attached to our roots. We are all attached to where we come from, right?
Yes.
We are so passionate. So if we can address some of these, like, it's, Mego said it, dialogue, right? Sit around the round table. One of the things I'm so much against when I'm in a region is projecting superiority of one region over the other.
True. Yeah.
And I think this is a blame I'll put on our leaders.
Why?
A lot of our leaders have this thing of projecting superiority of one region over the other. And I think it's one of the reasons that has messed us up as a country. Because now to the younger generation, we are inheriting the same thing, right? You're going to speak tomorrow, right? Tomorrow you're going to speak up and say, we are the people in power, we are this, right? Because of ABC, right? Because your leaders have projected this, we are the ones, right? Elamo tomorrow will come out and speak, oh, we had Obote, we were the first people to do this, right? And actually tomorrow will speak and say, oh, we had Olaras, we had we are this, right? Because once we start that thing of projecting superiority of one region over the other, then we have lost the cause, we have lost the fight. But then if we get to harmonize and start to look at ourselves not through the lenses of our regions and tribes and ethnicities, but looking at ourselves through the lenses of I am Ugandan, you are Ugandan, irrespective of where you come from. It's easier for us to sit down together and say, okay, there are these things that are happening, they need to be dealt with.
True.
A proper context, if you look at Kenya, sorry, let me just if you look at Kenya, one of the reasons I love Kenya is one, if you look at Kenya, they have leaders from different regions.
Yeah.
You hear the Mount Kenya leaders, you hear the Central Kenya leaders, you hear the Luo elders. Where is that in Uganda? The only people I know that probably have that are the Acholis who are trying to come out with a leadership, communal leaders. The Chigezi, the Chigezi leaders, you hear them, these are leaders from Kigezi, right? But where other regions? You get. So if we can get to have that thing come back, right? Because if you look at now, if you look at now, like now, let me give the Acholis, the Langos, the Akum, it's one language we speak. If we reach a point whereby we say, okay, instead of saying Acholi now, can we say the Luo elders? The Luo leaders, right? You get, because it's now easier to deal with such, because now you're getting a whole region, right? If you go to the northeast, you say, instead of saying the Ates or Kejon, can you say the Atekere leaders? You get, instead of saying the Baganda, can we say the Baganda? Because once you get those elders and leaders from those places, it's easier for us to combat some of these issues.
Monica, I just want to know from you, how then do we move on, especially in the context of young people? Because there are certain things we can't change, you know? There's something called the circle of influence and the circle of, The circle of influence are things that you can be able to change within your capacity. Then there's the circle of concern, things you can't be able to change as an individual. So what is our circle of influence as young people moving forward? How can we be able to play our part moving forward?
Thank you, Hannah. Personally, I think we're already doing it.
Okay.
Because one, if you look at the young people, I'm looking as far as 35, right? Beyond, like downwards. We have people who they embrace others. Especially, okay, fine. We are having cultural differences. We are saying Langis are doing this, Westerners are doing this, all those guys are doing etc. But you realize the beauty of Uganda is that we have universities, we have schools that harmonize all these people. And then they start to speak the same language and they start to think the same kind of way. And when they do that, you realize that they can work together. We're having projects, people are working together. So if we can do that at a school level, and we can do that in our offices, we just have to expand and the horizon will...
I've loved this conversation because we've been able to learn so much from each other. We're going to have more of this conversation next week on Sunday. Feel free to catch us right here on Your Space with your host, Hannah Arinitwe. Have a lovely week. Bye-bye.